The sight of strawberries, tomatoes, lettuce, grapes, almonds, citrus, berries, and vegetables rotting in American fields isn't just a seasonal hiccup, it's a warning. In states like California and Florida, where these crops once symbolized the strength of U.S. agriculture, farmers are now walking away from harvest-ready fields, sometimes in tears. This isn't about a drought, frost, or pest outbreak. It's deeper. Labor is scarce, input costs are rising, and even when crops are grown, the market isn't there to absorb them. Grapes and almonds, once lucrative exports, are being stockpiled or abandoned. Perishables like strawberries and greens are spoiling before they can leave the farm. Tomatoes are left unpicked because transportation costs now exceed their worth. It's not one crop, one region, or one cause. If you're tired of being lied to, if you're ready to expose the truth they don't want you to know, then don't just watch. Join this fight. Hit subscribe right now so you never miss the facts the corporations hope you'll ignore. Every new video pulls back the curtain a little more, and together we're building a movement they can't silence. Subscribe, stay informed, and let's take back control, one truth at a time. It's a systemic failure unraveling quietly across the country. The video makes it clear this is not an isolated crisis, but a collapse in motion. From broken supply chains and global trade shifts to economic pressure and crumbling infrastructure, the U.S. farming system is faltering. The implications stretch beyond empty fields into grocery prices, processed food shortages, and national food security. As the traditional backbone of American agriculture weakens, the silent breakdown signals a future where growing your own food may shift from choice to necessity. Crops are rotting in the fields, not from floods, drought, or disease, but from something worse, something man-made, systemic failure. Entire harvests of strawberries, tomatoes, lettuce, grapes, almonds, berries, citrus, and vegetables are being abandoned. Not because they couldn't grow, but because they couldn't be picked, or processed, or sold, because the American agricultural system, the foundation of our food supply, is cracking under the weight of labor shortages, market dysfunction, rising costs, and broken infrastructure. This isn't a fluke year. This is a warning, a quiet collapse that's been building for years. And now, it's happening in plain sight, one field at a time. Across the U.S., especially in states like California, Florida, and the Midwest, farmers are watching harvest-ready crops die on the vine, not due to weather events, but because they can't find enough workers to harvest them, or because the cost of labor, transportation, or processing outweighs the market price, or because global trade has shifted and demand has dried up. It's a death by 1,000 cuts, and farmers are being bled dry. The perishable crops are the most vulnerable. Tomatoes, strawberries, lettuce, greens, these are time sensitive. Once they're ripe, the clock is ticking. Delay the harvest by just a few days, and the entire crop spoils. But that's exactly what's happening, and not just once, again and again, across state lines and seasons. With labor in short supply, trucks backed up, and cold storage limited, farms are making the brutal decision to let crops rot rather than throw good money after bad. It's cheaper to lose them than to pay to pick them and watch them go unsold. In places like California's Central Valley, you can drive past rows of strawberries that were never touched. You'll see tomato vines bursting with fruit that will never be canned or cooked. Lettuce fields turning brown because they missed their window. It's not mismanagement, it's a broken system, and it's happening in the country that once fed the world. Even high-value crops aren't safe. Grapes, almonds, citrus, crops that were once the pride of U.S. exports, luxury produce that commanded top dollar. Now, demand has tanked. Global competitors are gaining ground. Shipping disruptions have snarled international trade, and many farmers are overstocked, underpriced, and unable to move product. Orchards are being left untended. Vineyards are being scaled back because maintaining them costs more than they bring in. The long game is being lost. Farmers are walking away. The crisis isn't just in the field, it runs through the entire supply chain. When raw produce is lost, the impact shows up later in the grocery aisles, in sauces that are thinner, snacks that are smaller, and prices that inch higher. The shelves might still be stocked, but the quality, the variety, the affordability, all quietly eroding. The disconnect between the farm-level devastation and the retail presentation is misleading. Americans think they're fine because the lights are on at Whole Foods, but behind the scenes, it's chaos. A patchwork of imports is filling the gaps, produced from Italy, from China, from Latin America, anything to make up for what domestic farms aren't delivering. And it's not just about taste or preference, it's about national food security, because if the US can't grow and move its own food, then it becomes reliant on foreign markets, markets that are unpredictable, politically volatile, vulnerable to war, tariffs, climate, or pandemic. Every crop we fail to harvest here is another inch of ground ceded to global supply chains we can't control. Why is this happening now? The short answer: the economics no longer add up. Fertilizer costs have spiked, fuel is more expensive, labor is scarce, input costs are up across the board, yet farm gate prices are down. Many farmers are now operating at a loss, and when you're farming on a knife's edge, one bad season is all it takes. The cushion is gone, the safety nets are thin, there's no margin left, so when demand slips or prices dip, farmers are forced to make the hardest calls: abandon a field, uproot an orchard, skip a season. This is most brutal for long-term crops, like almonds. You don't just plant them in the spring and harvest in the fall. It takes years to establish a productive almond orchard, years of investment, years of maintenance. And if the market crashes, if buyers disappear, or prices plunge, it's not just a lost season, it's a lost decade. That's the position many almond growers are in today. Faced with rising costs and falling demand, they're ripping out trees they spent years cultivating because they don't believe the system will recover in time to make it worth staying in the game. That loss of confidence, that's what should scare us most, because once faith in the system evaporates, so does the investment, the innovation, the labor, the infrastructure, and without that, recovery becomes nearly impossible. These aren't seasonal dips. This is a structural unraveling. The infrastructure itself is part of the problem. The entire U.S. agricultural model was built for a different era, a time of surplus labor, cheap fuel, predictable markets. That world is gone. What's left is a logistical nightmare. Trucks are more expensive, warehouses are full, cold storage is maxed out, there are too few processing plants, too few workers, too many bottlenecks, and when that system breaks down, perishable crops suffer first. If a tomato can't get from field to shelf in a matter of days, it's worthless. If a lettuce truck misses its window, the load is dumped. Every breakdown along the chain means another batch of produce wasted, another farmer unpaid, another field abandoned, and the ripple effect is huge. It affects food processors, restaurant suppliers, school cafeterias, local markets. Prices may not spike overnight, but they climb steadily, quietly, and over time, it reshapes what's available, what's affordable, what's viable, and eventually what's grown at all. All of this adds up to a disturbing reality. America may soon need to grow more of its own food, not as a lifestyle trend, not as a back-to-the-land fantasy, but as a practical response to a collapsing industrial food model. If the farms can't produce, and the markets can't support them, and the supply chains can't move them, then individuals, families, and communities will be forced to grow their own, not for fun, but for survival, because what's happening now is not sustainable. A food system that loses crops before harvest, that rewards abandonment over productivity, that imports what it used to export, that's not just inefficient, it's dangerous. And if nothing changes, it will lead to greater food insecurity, higher prices, and a level of instability that hits every household in the country. And still, most Americans don't see it, because the collapse isn't loud. There's no dust bowl, no breadlines, just quiet fields, rotting berries, wilted lettuce, almond trees being bulldozed in the night, and farmers walking away, not with protest, but with resignation. This is how systems fail, not with a bang, but with silence, with crops left unpicked, with policies left untouched, with trust eroded, acre by acre. There's no easy fix, but doing nothing is a choice too. And right now, that's the path we're on. If this breakdown continues, the question won't be, why are crops rotting? It'll be, why didn't we act when they did? The signs are clear, the system is breaking, and if we care about food security, about economic resilience, about national self-sufficiency, then we need to talk about it. Pressure lawmakers, demand reform, and invest in rebuilding this system before it's too late. Don't just scroll past this crisis. Share this video. Talk to people about it. Follow those trying to fix it, because silence is what got us here. And silence won't get us out. This isn't just an agriculture issue, it's an American issue, because when the farmers fall, the country falls. You can't outsource survival, you can't Uber Eats your way out of food insecurity, and no economy, no matter how powerful, can outgrow a collapsed food base. What's happening on these farms should be setting off alarms in every newsroom, every state house, and every dinner table. Instead, we get silence, shrinking headlines, or worse, blame pushed in every direction, except toward the real root causes. Let's stop pretending this is a temporary glitch. Let's stop acting like these are one-off stories. They're not. This is happening across the country, across seasons, and across crop types. We are watching a coordinated breakdown, one that connects labor, logistics, policy, and profit. And right now, the burden is falling on the shoulders of the very people who feed this nation. Let's talk about the labor crisis. Farm work has always been backbreaking, underpaid, undervalued, and now it's drying up. Fewer workers are willing or able to do the grueling seasonal labor it takes to pick strawberries, tomatoes, or lettuce under the hot sun for hours a day. Immigration policy changes have cut off labor pipelines. Wages haven't kept pace with inflation. Housing for workers is scarce, and many younger generations are walking away from farming entirely. And when the hands disappear, the harvest disappears too. Without workers, fields sit full and untouched. There are strawberries literally collapsing into the soil, lettuce wilting in rows as wide as freeways, all of it, food that took months to grow, wasted in days, and farmers, they're forced to take the loss. Insurance doesn't cover abandonment. There's no payout for the food that could have been picked. It's a punch in the gut, and it's happening over and over again. Then there's the cost explosion. Fertilizer has doubled or tripled in price in some regions. Fuel prices are draining operating budgets. Equipment repairs are delayed due to supply chain backlogs. Every single input, seed, water, pesticide, packaging, costs more, but the market doesn't care. Supermarkets still want rock-bottom prices, wholesalers still play hardball, and farmers are left in an impossible squeeze. Pay more to grow, and move a product that's worth less than it costs to deliver. In any other industry, this would be national news. If tech companies were forced to throw away millions in product because it costs too much to ship, the markets would melt down. But when farmers do it, it barely registers. It's just a tough year. It's treated like nature's fault, when really, it's policy failure and economic negligence at the core. And here's what's worse. It's not just farmers who pay, it's every single person who eats. The consumer gets hit next. You're already seeing it in your receipts, in the smaller portions, in the missing brands, but most of all, in the slow erosion of choice. Remember when you could walk into a store and pick from 5 different lettuce brands, or grab strawberries in February that actually tasted like strawberries? That freedom is fading, replaced by limited options, bland produce, and rising costs. We are trading abundance for availability, and eventually, we'll be trading availability for survival. That's where this heads if nothing changes. And it's not just fresh food. The impact is hitting processed goods too. If tomatoes don't make it out of the field, there's less pasta sauce, less salsa. If grapes go unpicked, wine production falls. If almond orchards are abandoned, everything from nut milk to snack bars to baking ingredients starts tightening up. The collapse starts small, quiet, invisible, but it scales and it multiplies. This is why food processing companies are already making adjustments, cutting down production, raising prices, shrinking packaging, not because of greed, but because the supply chain is choking at the source, and unless they can secure reliable, domestic crop inputs, they'll turn to cheaper foreign suppliers, many of whom don't follow the same safety or labor standards. The result, a weaker, riskier, more unstable food system for everyone. Let's not sugarcoat it. The US is slipping into food dependence, and once that happens, it's incredibly hard to claw back. Global trade can't be trusted to feed a nation. Ask any country that's faced an embargo, or war, or natural disaster. Relying on international markets to feed your population is a gamble, and right now, we are stacking all our chips on that gamble while letting our own farms die out. And let's be honest about what that does to rural America. Farming towns are already stretched thin, economically, socially, spiritually. They've been hollowed out for decades. Now with farms collapsing, there's even less reason for young people to stay. Less work, less community, less hope. What's left behind is despair. Generational farms being auctioned off, equipment rusting in barns, small town schools closing because the families are gone. We are watching not just the collapse of agriculture, but the collapse of identity, of culture, of the American way of life that politicians love to romanticize, but refuse to actually protect, because that's the final insult in all of this, the complete lack of political urgency. You don't see emergency sessions of Congress to rescue the food supply. You don't see primetime debates on how to rebuild farming infrastructure. Instead, we get partisan gridlock. We get subsidies that favor big agribusiness over small farms. We get band-aid policies that do nothing to fix the deep rot. Meanwhile, the people who actually grow the food are begging for help, not handouts, not bailouts, just a system that works, one where they can plant, harvest, and sell their crops without being crushed by costs or ignored by policymakers. And let's talk about risk, because every season this continues, the risk grows. Fewer farms means fewer redundancies. If a major crop fails, or if a natural disaster hits, a food shortage could develop overnight. The shelves would go empty fast, and in a country that's gotten used to convenience and abundance, the public response would be chaotic. We're not prepared for what a true food shock would look like, but we might be headed there, because as more farmers throw in the towel, as more infrastructure crumbles, the system loses its buffer, and once we hit that tipping point, where the domestic system can no longer produce enough to sustain us, we're at the mercy of foreign producers, international politics, and whatever climate disaster rolls through next. That's not resilience, that's surrender. So what now? We need a total rethink of how we support agriculture in America. We need policies that prioritize labor solutions, invest in local food systems, and give small and mid-sized farms the tools to survive and thrive. We need trade policies that don't sell out domestic growers, infrastructure funding that goes to processing and storage, incentives for sustainable farming that actually pencil out financially, real support, not sound bites. And we need consumers to understand what's at stake. This isn't someone else's problem. This is your food, your grocery bill, your kid's future. If you're tired of paying more for less, this is why. If you're worried about the next crisis, this is it. Because we are out of time for denial. The collapse is already happening, quietly, steadily, and unless we act, loudly, collectively, and urgently, this isn't going to end in a recovery, it's going to end in scarcity. The collapse of American agriculture isn't coming, it's here, and yet you won't hear about it on the evening news. You won't see breaking headlines, or presidential press conferences, because it's not explosive, it's not a hurricane, or a wildfire. It's quieter than that, slower. It slips by under the radar. Crops rot in silence. Orchards disappear without protest. Barns are emptied without ceremony. And the rest of the country keeps moving, blissfully unaware that one of the most foundational systems in this nation is actively falling apart. People assume someone else is handling it, that the government is tracking it, that economists are solving it, that tech will invent a way out, but they're not, and it won't, because this isn't a glitch in the code. This is a structural failure built into the bones of our food economy. We've created a system that punishes production, that discourages sustainability, that drives out small farmers and rewards consolidation. And now that system is cracking under pressure because the conditions that once made it work no longer exist. The weather is more volatile, labor is harder to find, input costs are unpredictable, and global trade is no longer a lifeline. It's a liability. The old math doesn't work, and the new math hasn't arrived. So farms are disappearing, quietly, permanently, and with every acre lost, we lose more than just crops. We lose independence, we lose security, we lose resilience, and that word resilience matters, because what happens when the next pandemic hits, when shipping lanes shut down, when geopolitical tensions spike and food imports get cut? What then? We can't just flip a switch and start producing what we've lost. You can't replant an orchard overnight. You can't rebuild a processing plant in a week. You can't train an agricultural workforce in a month. Recovery from this kind of systemic collapse takes years, and every month we wait to act is another step closer to the point of no return. But let's talk about solutions, because this doesn't have to be our future. This doesn't have to end in disaster. The knowledge is there, the skills are there, the land is there. What's missing is leadership, and political will, and public awareness. We need leaders who understand that food is national security, that farming isn't a hobby, it's the backbone of our economy, that feeding a population should never be outsourced to foreign markets or left to chance. We need investment, not just in subsidies that maintain the status quo, but in modern infrastructure, in regenerative farming, in farm worker housing, in labor reform, in regional food hubs, and in education that actually prepares the next generation to grow food, not just code apps. And we need a cultural shift. We need to stop treating farmers like relics of a dying past, and start recognizing them as the key to our future. Because the people walking away from farming right now, they're not lazy, they're not failures, they're survivors of a system that left them behind. And unless we rebuild that system, unless we make farming viable again, we will all pay the price. Already you're paying for it. You're paying more at the grocery store. You're paying for imported food that's traveled farther, lasted less, and cost more. You're paying in your taxes, through emergency bailouts, through food assistance programs, through crumbling rural economies that need rescue after every season. The question isn't whether we can afford to fix agriculture, it's whether we can afford not to, because we are at a crossroads. One path leads to food sovereignty, to stability, to farms that thrive, and communities that grow. The other path leads to dependence, to scarcity, to a future where America no longer feeds itself. We still have time to choose, but not much. Every tomato left to rot, every strawberry that spoils on the vine, every almond orchard bulldozed, that's a choice not to act, a choice to let the system fail. And the truth is, our leaders won't change unless we force them to. They will keep ignoring this until the pressure becomes impossible to avoid. That's where we come in. If you care about food, real food, grown in this country, this is your moment. Talk about this. Share the facts. Call your lawmakers. Support farmers where you can. Push for reforms that actually rebuild, not just patch. And most importantly, pay attention, because this quiet collapse may be out of sight, but it will not stay out of reach. It's already knocking at your door, in your grocery bill, in your reduced choices, in the silent disappearance of the farms you used to drive past. This is the front line of national stability, and we are losing it, acre by acre. Let's turn that around, before it's too late.